So if you're sitting around wondering, now that I've got this instrument, what should I get myself to try to do on it? I'm going to go through a few ideas of things that I think are invaluable practice. I'm going to do all of this today in the key of C, simply because it's nice and convenient. It's there's no sharps and flats in the key of C. It's easy to think in the key of C. But everything that we're going to do today is entirely transposable to any key, and that's important to realize, because after we learn these things, we want to make sure that we practice them in all keys. But starting out, to me, the most obvious thing to practice on the pedal steel is string groups to play major chords. So I'm up here at the 8th fret. All of this is going to be the chord of C major, and I'm going to start by playing strings 3, 4, and 5 all at once, and I'm going to have my middle finger on the 3rd string, my index finger on the 4th string, and my thumb on the 5th string, and I'm just going to play that chord all 3 notes at once. And we're going to, from here on out, call that group 1. Now I'm going to play the next inversion of that chord, which is immediately below that, on strings 4, 5, and 6. That's going to be, from here on out, group 2. Now I'm going to move down to the next inversion. And this gets a little interesting if you haven't practiced this before, because now we have to start spreading our fingers out. So now I'm going to play strings 5, 6, and 8. So now my thumb has to skip the 7th string and drop down a notch. And that's part of why this is good practice, is because it teaches our fingers over the course of time how to become independent from these certain little blocks of positioning. So here's strings 5, 6, and 8, or as from here on out, known as group 3. Now, I'm going to move down to the next group of this chord, where once again, my fingers are going to have to spread out. They're going to have to all get out of that same little block that they were in initially, and I'm going to play strings 6, 8, and 10. And that is forever going to be known as group 4. So here we go. Group 1, 3, 4, and 5. Group 2, 4, 5, and 6. Group 3, 5, 6, and 8. Group 4, 6, 8, and 10. And those are all a C major chord, C major triad. Now, it's crucial that when we're playing the pedal steel guitar, we have to learn some sort of muting and blocking techniques. So there's a couple of different ways we can do that. We can play the strings and let our palm fall down on them to block them. And by the way, my palm is just falling. I'm not using any force whatsoever. I'm just letting gravity do the work. All right. Or we can play the strings and then just set the picks right back down on them. That's called the pick blocking technique. The idea here is that in a perfect world, we would like to practice doing both of those things. So to me, this is the most obvious thing to practice when we're starting out with technical practice. And even to this day, this is usually how I warm up if I'm about to play a show. I'll just play these groups like this. You go down, everything we learn go in one direction, we learn it go in the opposite direction as well. So back up. And to me, this is the most obvious thing to practice on the pedal steel, especially if you're just starting out. And I suggest that you start doing this with some sort of time reference, either the metronome or a rhythm track that happens to be playing along in the key of C. So you can do that, and you can practice doing this very meticulously and very much in time every time. All right. Now, obviously, if you've been at this very long, that's going to get pretty old pretty quick, and you're going to want to play something a little bit more interesting. And when that time and place comes along, we can start arpeggiating these chords, and that's a big fancy word that simply means playing one note of the chord at a time. If we wanted to do that, we could start up here on group 1 and start with our thumb and play thumb, index, middle. From here on out, we're going to label those fingers T-I-M, thumb, index, middle. So we could play T-I-M on group 1, drop down to group 2 and do the same thing, group 3 and do the same thing, group 4 and do the same thing. So that teaches our fingers to move in a forward direction. Well, we want to teach them to move backwards as well. So we can go right back up and do the exact opposite of that. We can start with the middle finger, then the index, then the thumb. Drop down to the next group, same thing. Next group, same thing. Last group, same thing. Little things like that start teaching our fingers how to operate independently of each other. When we're playing the chords, they're learning how to operate all at the same time. When we play the arpeggios, they're learning to operate independently of each other. And I primarily use the palm blocking method for that, but you can use either one, or even better, if you can make them intersperse with each other, that's fantastic. You double your ability to mute things when you do that. Once again, that's going to run out of interest in things pretty soon. And at some point, we're going to want to get to the idea of playing something that sounds a lot more like music. And in my opinion, there is simply no better exercise than playing the major scale.